Welcome to Building Without Barriers Live. I am Julie Sawchuk, and thanks for joining me here today. I'm in the living room of my house. I'm wearing purple jersey knit dress from Pick-a-Posy today with this really beautiful purple necklace. Thank you, Jennifer, for providing me with my fashion today. I have just so that you can know the background as well, I have this beautiful wallpaper mural that my husband put up in our house. And today I want to welcome Warren Askew. He is our guest, and Warren is joining us from Point Edward, which is sort of near Sarnia, down in southwestern Ontario, and he is the COO of the Federal Bridge Corporation. Warren, I have to admit, when you first sent me the email connecting, I was like, the Federal Bridge Corporation, what the heck is that? And how can I help a bridge?
Right, yeah.
And it wasn't until we started talking that I kind of realized, okay, we can do stuff together here. So tell me the story of why you decided to reach out to me in the first place.
Absolutely, Julie, and thanks for having me today. It's very similar questions when I first heard about the Federal Bridge Corporation. I'm like, there's a corporation dealing with federal bridges? Absolutely. My time to get to the Federal Bridge before that, I was with airports and ran into the Rick Hansen Foundation, who's done a lot of work with airports. During my time now with the bridges, we're starting to pay attention to accessibility and what that means. So recalling all of those past experiences, there was a great opportunity to work with Rick Hansen Foundation. We did the accessibility study for Bluewater Bridge, and of course we met. Our paths finally intersected, and we've had a pretty good time, I hope. I hope from your perspective.
We haven't, and it was interesting because the whole, like, how do we make a bridge accessible? And I realized that it wasn't that's the what you do, the bridge, right? You're bringing people from the States into Canada, and that's your what, but it's your how you do that. That was what we have been working on, right? And the how for both public people coming across and the how for the people that are running the bridge, because there is a lot involved in running a bridge that I had no idea about. And so it was neat for me to see from the inside view of what goes on to keep that gate open and to keep traffic moving. And I know that right now things are very different in terms of the amount of traffic that you guys have, but the work is still going on to keep it open. And, when I was there, I think that was maybe one of your last snowfalls, and all of the snow removal equipment and all of the stuff that goes into that. But there's actually 5 buildings that are on your site. And can you just give us a little overview of what happens at each of those buildings?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. The bridge is the what, and really the attention that we had was on all of those facilities that the public or our employees really interact with on a daily basis. You'll never look at a bridge the same way now that you've seen behind the scenes. And you're right. I mean, it's thousands of people, thousands of vehicles a day, and they interact with us primarily through 5 buildings. And we looked at it in 2 ways. There's accessibility for the public. So we'll start there, and we have people, as you say, coming across, whether they're in trucks, bringing us the goods that we need, or if they're travelers coming into Canada, they're going to interact with our customs facilities. And so while we're not customs agents, we certainly are the landlord for them. And so we provide a lot of the buildings and the facilities. So a couple of buildings that we looked at. The first one was the corporate center. So that's where a lot of the commercial truck traffic will be processed through customs. And so we may have some operators of those vehicles with varying degrees of disability, and that would go through the facility. But we also have our own employees based there. So we're up on the 4th floor with our admin offices. So it was really important for us to look at it from an employee standpoint. We also had a look at the what we call the secondary traffic building. So those people that come into Canada, you may have gone and spent a little too many dollars over in the States, and you got to go in and pay your duties. You go into a secondary building. So that's the building that's not being used a whole lot right now because of the pandemic and the restrictions.
And that was the building that just made me nervous going in there, even though I hadn't even been across the border, just that whole what are you hiding kind of thing. But
Sure.
it's an important space. So making people feel comfortable in an uncomfortable space is tricky, and providing accessibility is one of the things that we have talked about with that space, and making it as accessible and welcoming to everybody, even though it's a high security space. And that's a tricky thing.
It sure is. There's a whole connotation when you're being told by a customs officer to go into that building. Probably doesn't give you warm and fuzzies, but it doesn't mean to say that it can't be accessible.
Exactly.
And to some degree, welcoming to the point where everybody's a human being, and we've got to treat everybody the same way with respect and dignity.
Yes.
So yeah, that's certainly a challenge with that space. We had a look at the Tourist Information Center. So we own that building. It's not quite on the Bridge Plaza itself, but it's an important welcome point right off the highway into Canada and into the province and the region of Sarnia-Lambton. So we had a look at that one. And of course, then our two big employee centers, our operations building. So when you're going back into the States, you pay us toll money, and so those folks there that have done a great job through the pandemic for us and keeping that bridge open and alive, they need a building as well in order to do their work, in order to have somewhere to eat. And then of course our maintenance garage as well, where, as you mentioned, we have all of that equipment and all the things that you don't really think of when you cross the bridge.
Yeah, and I got to meet all of your staff as well. We did some training sessions, the Building Without Barriers program that I offer with your staff. And it was so amazing working with your team, because it was a team. Everybody was there, from people involved in architectural and design of your spaces and maintenance, and your CEO was there as well. And how did you do that? How did you get everybody involved and as keen as they were to understand about creating accessible spaces at your corporation?
You really have to think about it. First and foremost is, why are we there? We're not there to because of our own self-importance. We're there to provide access to Canada for all kinds of people. It could be Canadians, could be Americans, but we're a welcoming point for Canada, and that includes everybody. And so the CEO and I were crystal clear on that we have to be able to understand what everybody needs and how best do we deliver that. So for Natalie and I, Natalie's our CEO, it was very easy for us to align on that, because we're much more than just a bridge. We're much more than just 5 buildings.
Yes.
We are mandated to provide that level of access. So from there, it was easy. But
you're going beyond the mandate, right? Like, to an extent, every organization has a mandate for accessibility, but that's like, this is the bar, right? It's a bar that's pretty easy to get to, but you guys are going above that, and you, like, a big part of that is bringing everybody to the table.
Sure, you and I, we had this conversation, and I think I made you chuckle when I said it. You talk about the National Building Code. You talk about any regulations and laws and rules and standards. They're the bare minimum for people not to get arrested.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's bare minimum compliance to the law. but it doesn't prevent you from going further. And I mean,
No.
this is exactly what we were talking about when I first ran into the Rick Hansen Foundation. The chap that came and spoke to us, we were a bunch of airports, and of course, airports, they do a lot of technical things, but accessibility is not necessarily one that is done well. And he looked at us all in the eye and he goes, "You guys know nothing about accessibility. You really don't." And it's true.
That's Brad McCannell. He's the vice
Right.
president at the Rick Hansen Foundation, and I love listening to Brad because he just says it straight. You don't get it.
Absolutely.
You need to do better. Yeah.
Right. And so we go from this mentality of, well, we comply to let's do much better. And this is where you helped us. And it's those things that we can't unsee now. That's the value behind all of this, where we can look at our facilities and go, we did really well there. That's great. Pat ourselves on the back. Let's move on because we didn't do so well over here, and we need to do more work. So when we talk about the team, yeah, Natalie and I, from a big picture standpoint, we're very much aligned. But it's the team that's at that crossing that's going to do the work. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be Natalie. We remove roadblocks for people, whether that's the public through something like this, or whether it's for our team in order to get things done. And it's them that will look at this list now of all of the things that we've done well, all of the things that we need to improve on, and be able to prioritize that list and say to us, this is what we're going to need in order to improve. And that's what this is all about. It's improvement. We'll never be perfect. We're going to strive to get there. And we can look at what the future is going to bring in terms of all of our new buildings and things over time. But we've got a facility now. We've got a whole bunch of information that you've given us, and it's not just the information; it's the education. So for me to have the whole team vertically integrated into that was really important, because there are going to be soap dispensers that are going to be that are going to need to be fixed or replaced, and we need to put them in the right spot in the bathrooms. There are doors that are going to need to get replaced over time, and we should think about putting those automatic door openers on them. This is the work that gets done every single day. And so it's that team that's so important in order to have them on side. But you're right, there was never any resistance. And it was education.
I love that you're talking about that, the vertical integration, and what comes into my head is one of the things that I say all the time, which is that there's a gap in understanding, how the accessibility features are used and how to do them properly. And it's just neat that you're also a bridge, right? Because here I am providing a bridge to lessen that gap, and it's working. Like traveling around, I had Usman with me, going around to all of those 5 buildings. And at one point he was like, I know I should hold this door open for you, but I think it's part of the test. And I was like, yeah, it's helpful for me to see how heavy the door is, for example. But and he's like, but I'm going to hold it open for you now. And so he got to see that firsthand of what it's like to get around in a facility from my perspective, right, which is using a wheelchair. And it was I think he had a lot of aha moments that day. And I got to talk to some of the maintenance staff in the maintenance shed, and Jess was one of those employees there who was really keen to learn what you guys can do to help make spaces more accessible for employees, and in the maintenance, in your, on the 4th floor of your corporate center. What would you say are at the top of your list for making spaces more accessible in your facilities?
Yeah, so high level, I think the big aha moments for us was what does accessibility really mean? The way that you explained it, it's about energy, makes total sense to us. We never would have thought of it that way, because, everyone's looking to have that checklist to be able to tick a box and say, yes, we're accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. It's about energy. It's about how accessible. So that was a big aha moment for us. And yeah, you're right. Usman actually had a great time, and told me after the things that he now sees that he never would have. He's never had the experience before at the other places that he's worked. That was great. For us, it's I think there's two things that we learned. The things that we do well was nice to hear, because we kind of think that way, but it was good to have that validation. So having, big open hallways, the carpet that's easy to roll on, those kinds of things are great. The big things for us is just how important parking is. We had some good parking, we had some bad parking, and looking at how we can make facilities, particularly bathrooms for travelers, that's huge. When you see that lineup of cars ahead of you, you're kind of gauging now, okay, there's a washroom there. Do I stop now, or do I carry on in this line and hope I get through customs on the other side? So having those facilities that are not just efficient, but effective, and very much accessible to everybody, that was a big one for us as well.
Yeah, let's talk about parking for a minute, because you're right. You ran the gamut of having really awesome accessible parking to some spaces not even really having accessible parking. So that idea of just understanding now that having a safe path of travel from an accessible parking space that's wide, that has a transfer aisle, and a curb cut right up onto a sidewalk that leads to the building, right? Where I could get out of my car and not have to worry about going behind a parked car or traveling through a line of traffic. So do you see where that is going to be like happening right away? It's a pretty easy thing to implement when you're talking about paint, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We put you through the ringer when we were looking at parking, because some of it was fairly easy and fairly straightforward. And a corporate center is a pretty, vanilla place to be. If you go to one corporate center, you've been to them all. But bridges, when you look at international crossings, they're busy places. We're talking thousands and thousands of vehicles a day. So that's where we're really paying attention now, is around those public areas where we have a lot of traffic, where we can create space fairly easily. What's it going to take? And as you pointed out, vertical signage, making sure we've got signs that are on posts for those winter times, and being able to clearly demarc where all these spaces are. That's one. The other easy one's just those walkways, as you said. Curb cuts, relatively easy thing to do once we see it.
Yeah, once you see where it needs to happen.
Right, but as you say, it's paint, and I'm looking at the calendar. We're in April. We are moving rapidly into painting season.
Yes.
And so part of what we do as an organization, we take on a number of students every year, and most of them work in maintenance. And part of their job is to go around with one of our full-timers and paint parking spots.
Right.
And they paint roads. And it a really easy thing to do. And so now we've got this opportunity where we're literally just a couple of months away starting our paint season. We can look at this and go, yes, let's paint in a walkway. We already know how we paint walkways because we have them in other places. So let's just replicate this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the conversations I want to go back to that we had really early on, it might have even been the very first time we spoke, was about employment. And one of the things that you and Natalie had talked about was the fact that when you post for positions available, you very often don't get anybody applying that has a disability. And I think that was a bit of a light bulb moment for you in terms of getting this whole process rolling with getting, our HFAC certification and bringing me on to help educate your team. Why do you think that's going on?
It's a really good question, and it's a tough one for us to answer. I think that there's a perception, perhaps, that, as you said at the beginning of the show, what's Federal Bridge Corporation, and what's this working at a bridge? Like, what is there to do at a bridge?
Mm-hmm.
And we're essentially like a small municipality. We have maintenance staff, we have operations staff, but we also have human resource staff. We have finance staff. We have engineers. These are all roles that anybody can be interested in, but we're not getting that. We're not getting that diversity and inclusivity, and I think part of it is just because people don't really know what we do, unless we do a better job of explaining that. And part of it is making sure that the community knows that we're there. And part of the attraction with this certification is, we can go thump ourselves on the chest and say we're certified under Rick Hansen, and what a great thing it is as an organization. But it's also a great thing for people who may have disabilities to be able to pick up on, because it's a connected community. Exactly. And say, hey, look, they're Rick Hansen Foundation. I know who they are. They're certified under Rick Hansen, that certification program. This may be a good place to work.
Exactly.
And so that's a huge driver for us. And it comes hand in hand. The certification's one thing. It's that stamp, that piece of paper, that grade. But it also comes with education for our own people. And, it's becomes easier once people know what we have to do. It becomes easier to prepare for anybody to work at any of our locations.
And it was really exciting for me to be there and see the discussions that were happening with your staff about, what would I do what should we do to change this kitchenette, for example, so that it would be accessible for somebody with a disability, so that they could work here comfortably. And that goes back to our conversation about energy too, right? And when you provide accessible workspaces, then it gives people who consume energy at a faster rate, i.e. a person with a disability, just doing everyday life things. So when you can make the bathroom more accessible, when you can make the kitchen more accessible and safe, right? Ability to operate with independence and dignity, then you have more of their energy available as an employee to do the work that needs to be done, whatever their job is, whether they're an engineer or whether they're in your high security with all of the big video screens and doing that computer technology job, right? There's all sorts of things that are going on at the Federal Bridge Corporation that I would have had no idea about, none whatsoever. So that's pretty neat. And if you were to go back in time in your previous employment, working for the airport authority or anything like that, what do you wish you knew like 5-10 years ago about accessibility?
Great question. I would say that it's remarkable to me just how bad accessibility is in some cases. And it's not because there are organizations out there that are failing because they want to fail. They're failing because they just don't know.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to point to a code and tick that box and say, I comply with the code. And it was that shakeup where we were told, you don't know about accessibility. Let me tell you. That for me is the big wake up. And I think you've seen that now, particularly with airports that have gone through certification. You're hearing very similar messages where people are becoming a little bit more enlightened. and realizing exactly what needs to be done, but in a very practical, common sense standpoint, as opposed to that theoretical, standards type of approach.
Yeah. And in that idea of practicality, right? It's about setting goals that are attainable. So you're the COO of this big corporation, and as a COO, I know you have lots of experience, managing people and budgets and timelines and making like your yearly plan, right? What are your goals? And so as that person, what would you say to somebody who is the head of a smaller organization, who is now's not an awesome time to talk about budgets and all of that kind of stuff, but from a general perspective, what advice would you give to a smaller organization about how they could move forward with their accessibility?
Yeah, great question. It's almost independent of size. Go through the exercise, because once you've gone through it, you're going to learn the quick wins. And yeah, absolutely, there's that propensity for people to say, oh yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to go through this assessment because it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of refits and retrofits, and I'm going to have to move doorways, and I'm going to have to move walls. And yeah, you may have to do some of that work, but what's the stuff that you can do today? We already mentioned one. For us, we have our own paint crew, so for us, that's a low fruit item.
Yes.
That's an easy win for us to be able to say, and play the game. I mean, we're looking at a points rating right now. How many more points can we get just by painting? How much more accessible do we become because of that? So there's all kinds of those little things. Yeah, absolutely. You may have to look at big fit out items, but replacing a grip in a bathroom with the right one may be very easy for you to do. And you look at it and go, yeah, I'm going to spend a few $100s doing that, but look at what that means. Yeah, exactly. Repositioning a soap dispenser, putting a paper towel holder in a bathroom on the right side of the sink, as opposed to right in front of the sink. These are the little things that we learned just going through the exercise that, and timing was great, Julie, because you kind of came to us right at the end of our fiscal year. So we've kind of got our plan set for the big stuff for this year. But there's so many little things that we can just do just in the course of our day-to-day. And that's the stuff that we'll be picking away at in the short term, so that we can start planning, next fiscal year, what are some of the bigger things that we're going to do?
Yeah, and putting it into that long-term plan,
totally.
but with short-term goals, right? And I know before I even came to your site, you had already pegged a bathroom that you knew things just weren't right, and you nailed it. You were totally right. And all of those little things, now your staff that does that work, they know what needs to be done, and I know it'll be on their list, and that it will actually get done. That's the super encouraging thing, because sometimes organizations are, oh yeah, we're gonna be more accessible, but the people involved in doing the work aren't involved in those discussions.
It becomes a whole conversation of talking heads.
Yes.
Right. And you mentioned it to us. You've had that experience where you've received the platitudes. Yeah, we'll look into that, knowing full well that it's in one ear and out the other. And what's the point? What's the point in having you down and telling us what we need to do if we're not going to do anything with it?
Yeah. So it's been very heartwarming and encouraging to work with you guys, and to see all of your staff be involved in the whole process, and your openness to receive that feedback, because sometimes it gets taken personally that the grab bars were installed improperly, or that the soap dispenser's too high, or whatever, because somebody did it, but it's because they didn't know, and that's okay. Yeah. And you guys get that. And I really have loved working with you guys, and I know we are going to do more work, because the Bluewater Bridge in Sarnia is just one of the bridges that brings you from America to Canada. And I just, the whole idea of, welcome to accessible Canada is just, yes, it's just such
Absolutely.
a win. Such a win.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Warren, for being with me today and joining me on Building Without Barriers Live. You can find us here on YouTube, and you can find me on my website, juliesawchuk.ca. Thanks again to Pick-a-Posy for providing me with my lovely purple outfit today. Warren, say hi to your staff for me. I hope that they have been watching, and I look forward to working with you guys again soon. Stay safe. It's a crazy time, and take care. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie.